The rain hammered against the law office windows like angry fists, each drop mirroring the storm brewing inside Claire Davidson's chest. The late October weather in Seattle was particularly brutal this year, matching the gray mood that had settled over the city since her father's sudden heart attack 3 weeks earlier. She sat rigidly in the burgundy leather chair, her knuckles white as she gripped her purse strap, watching her father's attorney shuffle through documents with the enthusiasm of someone announcing a terminal diagnosis. The office smelled of old leather and disappointment, its mahogany-paneled walls lined with law books that probably hadn't been opened in decades. Outside, the Space Needle pierced the cloudy sky like a steel monument to ambition, something her father had always pointed to as inspiration during her childhood. "See that, Claire?" he'd say. "That's what happens when people dream big and work hard." Now, sitting in this stuffy room, those words felt like mockery. "I know this comes as a shock," Mr. Henderson said, his voice carefully neutral as he slid the will across the mahogany table. "But your father was very specific about his wishes." Claire's eyes scanned the document, the legal jargon blurring together until one phrase jumped out like a slap across the face. "Davidson and Sons Construction Company is hereby bequeathed in its entirety to Jessica Marie Davidson." The words seemed to pulse on the page, growing larger and more impossible with each heartbeat. 8 years. 8 years of arriving at the office at 6 a.m., of staying late to finish proposals, of missing dates and social events and family gatherings because the business needs me. 8 years of learning every aspect of construction management from the ground up: permits, zoning laws, contractor relationships, client management, budget forecasting. 8 years of proving herself in an industry where women had to work twice as hard to get half the respect. All of it given away to someone who had spent the last 4 years bouncing between colleges like a pinball, changing majors every semester, and treating her education like an extended vacation funded by her father's indulgence. Her younger sister Jessica sat across the table, tears streaming down her face in what Claire recognized as her signature performance. At 26, Jessica had perfected the art of looking helpless while getting exactly what she wanted. Her blonde hair fell in perfect waves despite the humidity, and her designer dress, a black Diane von Furstenberg that cost more than most people's monthly rent, paid for by Daddy, no doubt, fit like it was tailored just for this moment of manufactured grief. Claire remembered buying her own black dress for the funeral at Nordstrom Rack, carefully checking the price tag twice before committing to the purchase. That was the difference between them. Jessica had never looked at a price tag in her life, while Claire had been budgeting since she was 16 and got her first job at a local hardware store to help pay for college. "I don't understand," Claire said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I've been working at the company for 8 years. Jessica just graduated college 6 months ago." Jessica dabbed at her eyes with a tissue. "Claire, I'm just as surprised as you are. I never expected bullshit." The word escaped Claire's lips before she could stop it. She'd spent 32 years being the responsible one, the reliable one, the one who showed up every day at 6 a.m. to open the construction office, while Jessica partied her way through 4 different colleges. Henderson cleared his throat uncomfortably. "There's also a provision here about the family home." "Let me guess," Claire interrupted, standing abruptly. The chair scraped against the hardwood floor with a sound like fingernails on a chalkboard. "That goes to Jessica, too." "Actually, no. The house is to be sold, and the proceeds split equally between you both. However, Jessica has the right of first refusal to purchase it at market value." Claire laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Of course she does." Outside, thunder rolled across the Seattle sky like God rearranging furniture, and the afternoon light took on that peculiar gray-green tinge that preceded the worst storms. Claire stared out at the city she'd grown up in, at the skyline dotted with buildings her father's company had helped construct. There was the Morrison Hotel renovation from 2019, the Westfield Shopping Center expansion from 2020, the series of luxury condominiums in Capitol Hill that had been her pet project for the past 2 years. Davidson and Sons had been her life, her identity, her future. Every brick laid, every permit approved, every satisfied client had been a step toward the day when she would take over the family business. And now it belonged to someone who couldn't tell a Phillips head screwdriver from a flathead, who thought load-bearing wall was probably some kind of fitness equipment. "There is one more thing," Henderson said, pulling out another envelope. "This is from your mother's estate. She left specific instructions that it should be given to you privately, after your father's will was read." Claire's mother had died 3 years earlier, a quiet woman who'd spent her life in her husband's shadow. Claire had assumed everything of value had already been distributed. She took the envelope with trembling fingers, noting her name written in her mother's careful script. "I'll leave you to read that in private," Henderson said, gathering his papers. "Jessica, we'll need to schedule a meeting next week to discuss the transition of business operations." Jessica nodded eagerly, still playing the overwhelmed innocent. "Of course. Claire, maybe you could help me understand how everything works. I mean, you know the business better than anyone." Claire turned slowly, studying her sister's face. Was she really that naive? Or was this part of some elaborate game? The way Jessica's eyes flickered away from direct contact suggested the latter. "Help you?" Claire repeated. "Help you run the company that should have been mine?" "It doesn't have to be like this," Jessica said, her voice taking on a pleading tone. "We're sisters. We can work together." "Work together?" Claire's voice rose. "I've been working there since I was 24. I know every client, every contractor, every permit process in this city. I've pulled all-nighters to meet deadlines while you were getting your stomach pumped at frat parties. And now you want me to work under you?" Jessica's mask slipped for just a moment, revealing something harder. Underneath. "I didn't ask for this, Claire. But it's what Dad wanted." "What Dad wanted," Claire repeated. She grabbed her coat and headed for the door. "I need some air." The Seattle streets were slick with rain, reflecting the neon signs of coffee shops and bookstores that gave the city its distinctive character. Claire walked aimlessly through Pike Place Market, past vendors hawking fresh salmon and handmade crafts, past tourists with their cameras and guidebooks, past all the normal life that continued while her world fell apart. The familiar smells of fresh bread and roasted coffee that usually comforted her now seemed overwhelming, too intense, like her senses were raw and exposed. She'd given up a job offer from a prestigious firm in San Francisco 3 years ago to stay and build Davidson & Sons. She'd sacrificed a relationship with David, a kind architect who'd wanted to move to Portland for his career because she couldn't abandon the family business. She'd worked weekends and holidays, missed her college roommate's wedding, skipped her cousin's baby shower. All for what? To watch her party girl sister inherit everything because she was Daddy's favorite? Her phone had been buzzing constantly since she left the office. Missed calls from Mike Torino, her father's best foreman, probably wondering what the hell was happening. Texts from subcontractors asking about upcoming projects. An email from the Hartwell Group asking about timeline adjustments for their downtown renovation. All these people counting on Davidson & Sons, counting on her expertise. And now they'd be dealing with Jessica's incompetence. Her phone buzzed with a text from Jessica. "Please don't be angry. We can figure this out together." Claire almost threw her phone into the nearest trash can. Instead, she tucked it away and ducked into a small cafe to escape the rain. The warmth hit her face as she ordered a coffee, her hands still shaking from anger and shock. She found a corner table and finally opened her mother's envelope. Inside was a letter and what looked like property documents. "My dearest Claire, if you're reading this, then your father's will has been read, and I suspect you're feeling lost and betrayed. I wish I could have prepared you, but your father made me promise not to interfere with his decisions about the business. However, I had decisions of my own to make. The enclosed documents show that I purchased a piece of commercial property downtown with money I inherited from my own mother. I never told your father about this investment. It's been generating rental income for 15 years, and I've been quietly reinvesting the profits. The property is at 1247 Harbor Street. I believe you'll find it interesting. It's yours now, along with the investment account that's been growing all these years. The current balance is approximately $2.3 million. I always knew you were the stronger one, the smarter one. Your father loved Jessica's spirit, but he never understood your determination. Use that strength now. Sometimes the best revenge is success. All my love. Mom Claire read the letter 3 times before the words fully sank in. 1247 Harbor Street. The address was familiar, but she couldn't place it immediately. She pulled out her phone and looked it up. Her coffee grew cold as she stared at the screen. 1247. Harbor Street was the address of Davidson and Sons Construction Company. Her mother had owned the land beneath her father's business for 15 years, and no one had known. Claire owned it now. But more than that, her mother had been playing a longer game than anyone realized, quietly building a financial foundation that would give Claire the power to determine Jessica's fate. She leaned back in her chair, a slow smile spreading across her face for the first time in hours. Outside, the rain was beginning to ease, and shafts of late afternoon sunlight broke through the clouds like spotlights illuminating a stage. The neighborhood around the cafe was coming alive with the end-of-workday energy, people hurrying to catch buses, ducking into shops, meeting friends for happy-hour drinks. Jessica wanted the business, she could have it. But Claire owned the ground it stood on. And if her mother's hint about the lease agreement was accurate, she might have a lot more leverage than Jessica could possibly imagine. The game was just beginning, and for the first time since sitting in that lawyer's office, Claire felt like she might actually be holding the winning hand. 3 weeks later, Claire sat in her apartment overlooking Elliott Bay, surrounded by legal documents and property records spread across her coffee table like pieces of a complex puzzle. Her mother's investment portfolio was even more impressive than the letter had indicated. $2.3 million had grown to nearly $2.8 million with recent market gains. But it wasn't just about the money. Her mother had been methodical, strategic, thinking decades ahead. The Harbor Street property wasn't just the land beneath Davidson and Sons, it was the entire block. Mom had quietly acquired adjacent lots over the years through shell companies with names like Emerald City Holdings and Pacific Northwest Development LLC, creating a small real estate empire that no one, not even Dad, had suspected. The investment statements told a story of remarkable patience and foresight. Her mother had started with the original Harbor Street lot in 2008, buying it during the financial crisis when commercial real estate prices were at rock bottom. Over the following years, she'd systematically acquired neighboring properties whenever they came up for sale, always paying cash through different corporate entities to avoid detection. Claire spread the documents across her coffee table like pieces of a complex puzzle, each deed and title transfer revealing another layer of her mother's secret strategy. There was the parking lot to the north, purchased in 2012. The old warehouse to the south, acquired in 2015. Even the small corner building that housed Mario's Deli, where Claire had eaten lunch countless times during her years at Davidson and Sons. Her mother had owned that too, since 2017. The financial records showed steady rental income from all the properties, carefully reinvested in a diversified portfolio of stocks and bonds. Her mother hadn't just been collecting real estate. She'd been building a business empire, one that generated passive income while growing in value year after year. Claire's phone rang, interrupting her research. Jessica's name flashed on the screen. "Claire, thank God you answered." Jessica's voice was frantic. "I need your help. The Hartwell Project is falling apart, and I don't know what to do." The Hartwell Project. Claire knew it intimately, a $3.2 million commercial renovation downtown that she'd spent 6 months planning before Dad's death. It was the company's biggest contract, the one that would secure their reputation and financial stability for the next 2 years. "What's wrong with it?" Claire asked, keeping her voice neutral. She could already guess. Jessica had probably swanned into project meetings with her usual combination of confidence and ignorance, making promises she couldn't keep and decisions she didn't understand. Everything. The permits got held up because apparently there were some zoning issues that weren't properly addressed in the initial application. The contractors are threatening to walk because they haven't been paid for the preliminary work. Something about the check being held up because of insurance verification problems. And the client is talking about pulling out entirely because we missed 2 major milestone deadlines. Jessica's voice was getting higher and more frantic with each word. Mr. Hartwell called me this morning screaming about delays and cost overruns, and I don't even understand half of what he was talking about. Something about load calculations and permit amendments, and I don't know what any of that means. Claire wasn't surprised. She knew the Hartwell project intimately. Every permit requirement, every contractor involved, every potential pitfall that could derail the timeline. She'd spent 6 months developing contingency plans for issues that might arise, creating detailed schedules that accounted for Seattle's notoriously slow permit approval process. Jessica had probably thrown all of that preparation out the window, assuming she could charm her way through complex construction management like she'd charmed her way through everything else in life. Claire wasn't surprised. Jessica had probably waltzed into the first project meeting with her usual confidence and no actual knowledge, assuming she could charm her way through complex construction management. "Have you talked to Mike Torino?" Claire asked. Mike was their best foreman, a gruff 50-something who'd been with the company for 12 years. "He quit yesterday," Jessica said, her voice small. "He said he wasn't going to babysit some college kid who didn't know a load-bearing wall from drywall. Actually, what he said was a lot more colorful than that, but you get the idea." Claire winced. Mike Torino was more than just the company's best foreman. He was the institutional memory of Davidson and Sons, the guy who knew which subcontractors could be trusted, which city inspectors were reasonable, and which shortcuts would pass inspection versus which ones would get you shut down. Losing Mike was like losing the company's operational backbone. "And it's not just Mike," Jessica continued. 3 other guys quit this week. The ones who stayed are talking about looking for other jobs. I heard Danny Martinez telling someone on the phone that he didn't want to be associated with a sinking ship run by some spoiled princess. I mean, they don't even know I can hear them. They're not even trying to be subtle about it. The image of the seasoned construction workers openly mocking Jessica would have been funny if it weren't so predictable. These were men who'd worked with their hands their entire lives, who judged people based on competence and reliability rather than charm and connections. Jessica's usual tactics weren't just ineffective in this environment, they were counterproductive. Claire almost felt sorry for her. Almost. "I could really use your help," Jessica continued. "Just temporarily, until I get the hang of things. I know we didn't get off to the best start, but we're family." Family. The word tasted bitter in Claire's mouth. Where was family when Dad was writing his will? Where was family when Jessica was probably whispering in his ear about how she deserved the business more? "I'm sorry, Jess, but I've moved on," Claire said. "I'm starting my own venture." It wasn't entirely true yet, but it would be soon. "Your own?" "Claire, you can't compete with Dad's company. You know how he felt about that." "Dad's dead," Claire said quietly. "And it's your company now, remember?" After hanging up, Claire pulled out her laptop and began researching. If she was going to play this game, she needed to understand every rule, every loophole, every advantage. She spent the next 2 days learning everything she could about commercial real estate law in Washington state. She studied lease agreements, tenant rights, property development regulations, and zoning laws, until her eyes burned and her head ached. Her dining room table became a command center, covered with legal textbooks, printed articles, and handwritten notes. The deeper she dug, the more impressed she became with her mother's foresight. The lease agreement wasn't just a standard commercial rental contract. It was a masterpiece of legal strategy, crafted by what must have been very expensive attorneys who understood exactly what they were creating. The current lease agreement, between Davidson and Sons and the property owner, technically Emerald City Holdings, one of her mother's shell companies, was set to expire in 18 months. The rent was embarrassingly low, locked in at rates from 15 years ago when the neighborhood was still transitional, rather than prime commercial real estate. Dad had probably thought he was getting the deal of the century, never realizing that his wife was on the other side of the transaction. More importantly, the lease had several interesting clauses that her mother's lawyers had crafted very carefully. There were provisions for rent increases based on market rates, clauses about property improvements and modifications, and most interesting of all, a section about business conduct and professional standards that read like it had been written by someone who understood exactly how a construction company could fail. Clause 7.3 required the tenant to maintain professional standards consistent with industry best practices. Clause 12.1 mandated timely fulfillment of contractual obligations to clients and subcontractors. Clause 15.4 demanded maintenance of all required business licenses, insurance policies, and regulatory compliance. Each clause came with specific penalties for violation, escalating from financial penalties to lease termination depending on the severity and frequency of infractions. It was like her mother had anticipated every possible way Jessica could screw up the business and built in legal consequences for each scenario. Claire smiled as she read that particular section. Her mother had been more devious than anyone realized, and definitely more strategic than her father had ever given her credit for. On Friday morning, Claire walked into the offices of Morrison, Burke & Associates, one of Seattle's most prestigious law firms. She'd done her homework. They specialized in commercial real estate and had a reputation for aggressive but ethical representation. "Ms. Davidson," said Sarah Morrison, the firm's founding partner. She was a sharp-featured woman in her 50s with silver hair and eyes that missed nothing. "I've reviewed the documents you sent over. This is quite an interesting situation." "That's one way to put it," Claire said. "Your mother was clearly a very intelligent woman. These property acquisitions show remarkable foresight. And the lease agreement," Morrison smiled. "It's a work of art, honestly. Perfectly legal, but it gives the property owner significant leverage." "What are my options?" Morrison leaned back in her leather chair. "Well, you could simply raise the rent to market rates when the lease expires. Given the location and size of the property, that would be approximately $15,000 per month instead of the current $3,500. Claire whistled softly. That kind of rent increase would cripple Jessica's profit margins. "Or," Morrison continued, "you could exercise some of the other clauses in the lease. There are provisions for immediate rent adjustments if the tenant fails to maintain certain standards of business operation, such as professional conduct, timely payment of contractors, maintaining proper insurance and licensing, fulfilling contractual obligations to clients." Morrison's smile grew wider. "If your sister's company is having the kinds of problems you've described, she may already be in violation." Claire felt a flutter of excitement in her chest. What would happen then? You could trigger an immediate lease renegotiation, or in extreme cases, termination with 30 days' notice. 30 days. Claire imagined Jessica scrambling to find new office space, trying to relocate the company's equipment and files, while dealing with angry clients and departed employees. "There's another option," Morrison said. "Something more comprehensive." Claire leaned forward. "You could start your own construction company. Use your industry knowledge and contacts to compete directly. Given your experience and reputation in the field, you'd have significant advantages. And when your sister's company inevitably struggles, I could buy her out," Claire finished. "Exactly. Not just the business, but the contracts, client relationships, everything. At that point, you'd own both the company and the property it operates from." Claire walked out of the law office feeling like she was floating. The pieces were all falling into place, but she needed to be patient, strategic. Her mother's letter had been right. The best revenge wasn't loud. It was smart. That afternoon, she drove through her old neighborhood, past the house she'd grown up in. There was already a for sale sign on the lawn. Jessica was moving fast to liquidate assets, probably needing the cash to keep the business afloat. Claire's phone buzzed with another text from Jessica. "Please reconsider helping. The Hartwell client is meeting with us Monday. I really need someone. Who knows what they're talking about?" Instead of responding, Claire drove to a Starbucks and opened her laptop. She began drafting a business plan for Davidson Construction Solutions. Not Davidson and Sons, that name belonged to the past. This would be something new, something better. She started making a list of her father's former clients, the ones she'd built relationships with over 8 years of dedicated service. She knew their needs, their budgets, their timelines. More importantly, she knew which ones were probably getting nervous about their current projects with Davidson and Sons. By Sunday evening, she had a complete business plan, a list of potential clients, and a meeting scheduled with a small business loan officer. She wouldn't need much startup capital. Her mother's investment would cover that. But she wanted everything to look legitimate, professional. Monday morning, while Jessica was presumably stumbling through her meeting with the Hartwell client, Claire was registering her business name and filing for all the necessary licenses and permits. She rented a small office space across town, nothing fancy but professional enough to inspire confidence. Tuesday, she hired Mike Torino. "You sure about this, Claire?" Mike asked as they sat in his pickup truck outside a job site. "Your dad wouldn't have liked you competing with the family business." "My dad left the family business to someone who doesn't know how to run it," Claire replied. "I'm not competing with it. I'm preparing to replace it." Mike studied her face for a long moment, then nodded. "When do I start?" By the end of the week, Claire had hired 3 more experienced contractors who'd recently left Davidson and Sons, frustrated with Jessica's management. Word was getting around the industry that the company was in trouble. Claire's phone rang Friday evening. Jessica again. "Claire, we lost the Hartwell contract," Jessica said, her voice hollow. "They're terminating for cause. They say we failed to meet professional standards." Claire made sympathetic noises, but inside she was calculating. The Hartwell contract had been worth $3.2 million. Its loss would create a significant cash flow problem for Davidson and Sons. "I don't know what I'm doing wrong," Jessica continued. "Dad made it look so easy." "Dad had 30 years of experience," Claire said, "and he had help. Will you please come back? I'll make you a partner. 50-50 split." Now she was desperate. Claire almost felt sorry for her. Almost. "I'm sorry, Jess. I'm committed to my own path now." That night, Claire poured herself a glass of wine and sat on her balcony, looking out at the city lights. Phase 1 was complete. Jessica's company was struggling, just as predicted. Phase 2 would begin soon enough. Her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Ms. Davidson, this is Robert Hartwell. I heard you've started your own company. I'd like to discuss a potential project. Can we meet next week?" Claire smiled and typed back, "I'd be delighted, Mr. Hartwell." The dominoes were starting to fall. 6 months after that rainy day in the lawyer's office, Claire stood in her new company's headquarters, a sleek, modern space in South Lake Union, with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Seattle skyline. Davidson Construction Solutions had grown from a one-woman operation to a team of 15 skilled professionals, and their project calendar was booked solid for the next 8 months. The Hartwell project had been just the beginning. Word traveled fast in Seattle's construction industry, especially when it involved the Davidson family drama. Clients who'd grown frustrated with Jessica's inexperience began reaching out to Claire directly. She didn't have to poach them. They came to her. "Claire, we've got another one," said Mike Torino, walking into her office with a grin. He'd become her unofficial second-in-command, and his loyalty to quality work over family politics had proven invaluable. "Peterson Development wants to meet about their new hotel project. That's a $12 million job." Claire looked up from the contracts she was reviewing. "Did they mention why they're not going with Davidson and Sons?" "Oh, they did. Apparently, Jessica's team missed 3 consecutive deadline meetings and submitted a bid that was off by about $2 million. The wrong direction. Claire shook. Her head. She'd tried to feel bad for Jessica. Really tried. But it was hard to feel sympathy for someone who'd inherited a successful business and was systematically destroying it through incompetence and arrogance. Her phone buzzed with a text from her real estate attorney. Inspection complete. Davidson and Sons is in violation of lease clauses 7.3, 12.1, and 15.4. Recommend immediate action. Claire had been waiting for this message. 3 months ago, she'd quietly commissioned an inspection of the Davidson and Sons property, as was her right as the landlord. The company had fallen behind on property maintenance, failed to update required insurance policies, and most damaging of all, had received multiple complaints from the city about unprofessional conduct on job sites. All violations of the lease agreement her mother had so carefully crafted. "Mike, can you handle the Peterson meeting yourself?" Claire asked. "I have some business to take care of." 20 minutes later, Claire walked into the familiar offices of Davidson and Sons for the first time since her father's death. The place looked tired. Stacks of unpaid invoices on Jessica's desk, empty coffee cups scattered around, and a general air of desperation that seemed to permeate the walls. Jessica looked up from her computer with red-rimmed eyes. She'd lost weight, and her usually perfect appearance was disheveled. The stress was clearly taking its toll. "Claire?" Jessica stood up quickly, hope flickering across her face. "Oh my God, I'm so glad you're here. I was just about to call you." "Were you?" Claire kept her voice neutral as she looked around the office that had once been her second home. "Yes, I've been thinking, maybe it's time we talked about that partnership I mentioned. I know I said 50-50 before, but honestly, I'd be willing to consider 60-40 in your favor. You clearly understand this business better than I do." Claire almost laughed. 6 months ago, Jessica had inherited everything and offered Claire nothing. Now she was desperate enough to offer her majority control of a failing business. "That's generous," Claire said. "But I'm not here about a partnership." She pulled out an official-looking envelope and handed it to Jessica. "I'm here in my capacity as your landlord." Jessica's face went white as she read the letterhead. "Landlord? What are you talking about?" "The property Davidson and Sons operates from. I own it. Mom left it to me." Jessica sank into her chair as if her legs had given out. "That's impossible. Dad would have known." "Apparently not." Claire sat down across from Jessica's desk, the same chair she'd occupied hundreds of times as an employee. Now she was here, as the person who controlled Jessica's fate. "The letter is a formal notice of lease violations. You have 30 days to correct the issues or face eviction." Jessica scanned the document, her hands shaking. "Professional conduct violations? Failure to maintain insurance? Claire, these are technical issues. Surely we can work something out. Can we?" Claire leaned back in her chair. "Let's see. You've lost 3 major contracts. Mike and half the experienced crew have quit. You're behind on payments to subcontractors. And from what I hear, the city is considering suspending your general contractor's license. How do you know all that? Seattle's construction community is smaller than you think." Word gets around. Jessica's composure finally cracked completely. Tears streamed down her face as she looked around the office that had been her father's. Pride and joy. "I never wanted this, Claire. I tried to tell Dad I wasn't ready, but he wouldn't listen. He said I had natural leadership abilities, that I could learn the technical stuff later." Claire felt a flicker of the sympathy she'd been trying to suppress. "Then why didn't you ask for help? Real help, not just when everything was falling apart." "Because everyone expected me to fail." Jessica's voice rose. "You, Mike, all of Dad's old clients. I could see it in your faces. You were all just waiting for me to prove I didn't deserve this. So you decided to prove us right?" Jessica wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. I thought I could figure it out. I thought if I just projected confidence, everything else would fall into place. That's how it always worked before. Claire studied her sister's face. For the first time in months, Jessica seemed genuinely vulnerable instead of manipulative. But it was too little, too late. "What do you want from me, Claire?" Jessica asked quietly. "Do you want me to beg? Because I will. I'll get on my knees right now if that's what it takes." "I don't want you to beg," Claire said. "I want you to face reality." She pulled out another envelope, this one containing an offer to purchase. Davidson Construction Solutions is prepared to buy out Davidson & Sons. All assets, client contracts, equipment, and intellectual property. Jessica opened the envelope and stared at the number. This is less than half what the company is worth." "It's exactly what the company is worth in its current condition," Claire corrected. "Probably more than you'll get if you wait another 6 months." "And if I don't accept?" Claire's voice was matter-of-fact. "Then, in 30 days, you'll be evicted from this property. You'll have to find new office space, move all the equipment, try to salvage whatever contracts haven't been canceled, and explain to your remaining clients why they should trust a company that can't even keep its lease current." Jessica stared at the offer for a long time. Outside, the Seattle afternoon was gray and drizzly, typical for October. The sound of traffic on Harbor Street filtered through the windows, the same street where Claire now held all the power. "You planned this," Jessica said finally. "All of it. You knew about the property from the beginning." "I found out the same day you inherited the business," Claire replied. "But yes, I planned what came after. Dad always said you were the smart one. He said I had the personality for business, but you had the mind for it." Jessica laughed bitterly. "I guess he was half right." Claire felt an unexpected pang of sadness. Despite everything, Jessica was still her sister. "He loved you, Jess. That's why he left you the business. He thought he was giving you what you wanted. What I wanted was his approval. The business was just a symbol of that, I guess." Jessica looked around the office one more time. "You know what's funny? I'm actually relieved. I've been having panic attacks for months, lying awake every night worrying about payroll and permits and insurance claims. I wasn't built for this." She picked up a pen and signed the purchase agreement without reading the details. "There," Jessica said, sliding the papers back across the desk. "It's yours, all of it, just like it should have been from the beginning." Claire felt a moment of vertigo as she looked at her sister's signature. 6 months of careful planning had led to this moment, and now that it was here, the victory felt more complex than she'd expected. "What will you do now?" Claire asked. Jessica shrugged. "Maybe I'll go back to school, get an MBA or something. Learn how business actually works instead of just assuming I already know." She paused. "What about the house? Are you going to buy?" "That too." Claire had been thinking about the family home, the one Jessica had the right of first refusal on. "No," she said. "That's yours if you want it. I have my own place now." Jessica looked surprised. "Really?" "Really. Despite everything, I don't want to see you homeless." For the first time in months, Jessica smiled genuinely. "Thank you. That means a lot." As Claire walked out of the Davidson & Sons office, for the last time, she felt the weight of 6 months of strategic planning lifting from her shoulders. The business was hers now, along with all of its challenges and opportunities. But she had the experience, the team, and the vision to make it thrive. Her phone buzzed with a text from Mike. "Peterson meeting went great. They want to sign. Also, got calls from 3 other potential clients. Word's getting out that you've acquired D&S." Claire smiled as she walked to her car. The consolidation of the 2 companies would create the largest independent construction firm in Seattle. She'd gone from losing everything to owning more than she'd ever dreamed possible. But the sweetest part wasn't the money or the success. It was the knowledge that she'd done it all through patience, intelligence, and strategic thinking. No begging, no emotional manipulation, no family guilt trips, just pure professional competence. Her mother would have been proud. 1 year later, Claire stood on the rooftop of a gleaming new office building in downtown Seattle, watching her construction. Crew put the finishing touches on what would become the new headquarters of Davidson Construction Solutions. The view from the 42nd floor was breathtaking. Elliott Bay stretched out to the west, the Olympic Mountains rose like sleeping giants to the northwest, and the entire city sprawled below like a living testament to human ambition and ingenuity. "Hell of a view," said Mike Torino, joining her at the edge of the rooftop. "Your dad would have loved to see this." Claire smiled, adjusting her hard hat against the afternoon breeze. "He would have tried to take credit for it somehow." "Probably," Mike chuckled, "but he'd have been proud too. What you've built here, it's bigger than what he ever imagined." The numbers were impressive, even to Claire. Davidson Construction Solutions now employed 87 people across 3 divisions: commercial construction, residential development, and a new green building initiative that was attracting attention from environmentally conscious clients throughout the Pacific Northwest. Their annual revenue had grown from $0 to $43 million in just 18 months. But it wasn't just about the size. It was about the culture. Claire had built something her father never could. A company where talent mattered more than politics, where innovation was rewarded, and where employees felt valued rather than expendable. "Ms. Davidson?" A young woman in a business suit approached from the rooftop access door. "I'm sorry to interrupt, but you have a call from the mayor's office. Something about the waterfront redevelopment project." Claire's pulse quickened. The waterfront redevelopment was the biggest municipal project in Seattle's history. A $2 billion initiative to transform the city's aging industrial waterfront into a mixed-use commercial and residential district. Landing even a piece of that project would establish Davidson Construction Solutions as a major player in the regional market. "I'll take it in the trailer office," Claire said, making her way toward the temporary structure that served as the on-site command center. The call was brief, but electrifying. The city had narrowed down the general contractor candidates to 3 firms, and Davidson Construction Solutions was on the list. The final presentations would be held in 2 weeks. After hanging up, Claire sat in the trailer for a few minutes, absorbing the magnitude of the opportunity. 18 months ago, she'd been sitting in a lawyer's office, watching her inheritance slip away to someone who didn't deserve it. Now she was being considered for the kind of project that could transform her company from a regional success story into a national player. Her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Congratulations on the waterfront project consideration. You deserve it." Claire stared at the message for a moment before realizing it was from Jessica. They hadn't spoken since the day Jessica signed over the company, though Claire had heard through mutual acquaintances that her sister was doing well. She'd enrolled in a graduate program at the University of Washington, studying nonprofit management, and was apparently thriving in an environment that valued her people skills without requiring technical expertise she didn't possess. Claire typed back, "Thank you. How did you hear about it?" The response came quickly. "I volunteer with the Urban Planning Council now. Your name came up in the meeting. I may have mentioned to the mayor that you were the real brains behind Dad's success." Claire felt an unexpected warmth in her chest. After everything that had happened, Jessica was still looking out for her in her own way. "You didn't have to do that," Claire replied. "Yes, I did. I owe you more than you know." Before Claire could respond, her project manager knocked on the trailer door. "Claire, we've got an issue with the elevator installation. The contractor's saying there's a problem with the shaft dimensions." Work called, as it always did. But as Claire headed back into the building to solve the latest crisis, she felt a sense of completeness that had been missing for years. She wasn't just successful. She was building something meaningful, something that would last. 2 weeks later, Claire stood in the Seattle City Council chambers, facing a panel of city officials, urban planners, and community representatives. The waterfront redevelopment presentation was the culmination of months of preparation, and she'd never felt more ready for anything in her life. "Ms. Davidson," said Mayor Patricia Chen, "your company's proposal is impressive, but you're competing against firms with decades more experience in projects of this scale. What makes you believe Davidson Construction Solutions is the right choice for this undertaking?" Claire had anticipated this question. "You're absolutely right that we're the newest firm at this table, but that's exactly why we're the best choice." She clicked to the next slide in her presentation, showing a timeline of recent major construction projects in Seattle and their completion records. The established firms have been doing things the same way for decades. Same subcontractors, same processes, same cost overruns and deadline extensions that have become accepted as normal in this industry. We don't accept that as normal. She clicked again, showing a comparison chart of Davidson Construction Solutions project completion rates versus the industry average. Every project we've completed in the past 18 months has been delivered on time and under budget. Not because we cut corners, but because we approach each job with fresh eyes and innovative solutions. We use the latest project management software. We maintain direct relationships with our subcontractors instead of hiring through middlemen. And we view our clients as partners rather than just revenue sources. Councilmember Richard Torres leaned forward. "That sounds impressive in theory, Ms. Davidson, but the waterfront project involves complexities that a smaller firm may not be equipped to handle. Environmental concerns, historic preservation requirements, coordination with federal agencies, all challenges that require creative problem-solving rather than just throwing more bodies at the problem," Claire replied smoothly. "Let me share a specific example." She clicked to a photo of a recently completed mixed-use development in Capitol Hill. This project involved converting a century-old warehouse into luxury condominiums while preserving the building's historic facade and meeting modern seismic safety requirements. The previous contractor had been struggling with the project for 8 months when the developer came to us. "What was the challenge?" asked Mayor Chen. "The original contractor was trying to retrofit the building using traditional methods that required extensive structural modifications. We brought in a specialist in historic preservation and developed a solution using advanced composite materials that provided the necessary earthquake resistance while preserving the building's architectural integrity. We completed the project in 4 months." Claire could see she had their attention now. She clicked to the final slide of her presentation, a detailed timeline and budget for the waterfront project that was 15% lower than the closest competitor's bid. "This is how we propose to approach the waterfront redevelopment," she said. "Not as a massive, unwieldy project that's too big to manage effectively, but as a series of interconnected phases that can be optimized individually while maintaining the overall vision." The presentation continued for another 20 minutes, with Claire fielding questions about everything from union relationships to environmental impact mitigation. She'd prepared for this moment like it was the final exam of her entire career, and it showed. When it was over, Mayor Chen thanked all the presenting firms and announced that the decision would be made within a week. Claire walked out of City Hall feeling cautiously optimistic. She'd given the best presentation of her life, but she was competing against companies with billion-dollar track records and political connections going back decades. 3 days later, her phone rang at 6 a.m. "Ms. Davidson, this is Mayor Chen's office. The mayor would like to meet with you this morning to discuss the waterfront project." Claire's heart hammered as she drove downtown. A private meeting could mean anything: good news, bad news, or just more questions. She'd learned not to get her hopes up too early. But when she walked into the mayor's office and saw Patricia Chen smile, she knew. "Congratulations, Ms. Davidson. Davidson Construction Solutions has been selected as the primary contractor for the Seattle waterfront redevelopment project." The rest of the meeting was a blur of handshakes, photo opportunities, and discussions about project timelines and public relations strategies. Claire signed more documents than she could count, each one representing a level of professional achievement she'd never dared to imagine. When she finally walked out of City Hall, She was the head of a company with a $2 billion project and a guaranteed place in Seattle's business history. Her phone was already buzzing with calls from reporters, industry publications, and potential new clients. The news of the contract award was spreading fast. But the call she answered first was from Mike Torino. "Claire, I just heard on the radio. $2 billion? Are you kidding me?" Claire laughed, the sound echoing off the marble walls of City Hall's lobby. "I'm not kidding, Mike. We just became the biggest construction company in the Pacific Northwest." "Holy shit," Mike said, then quickly added, "Sorry, boss. I mean, holy cow." "I think holy shit is appropriate in this situation," Claire replied, grinning despite herself. That evening, Claire found herself back on the rooftop of her soon-to-be-completed headquarters building, this time alone. The city sparkled below her like a circuit board, each light representing someone's home, someone's business, someone's dreams. Soon, a significant portion of those lights would be shining from buildings her company had constructed. Her phone buzzed with another message from Jessica. "Saw the news about the waterfront project. Mom would be so proud. Dad too, if he was honest with himself." Claire typed back, "How are you doing?" "Really? Really good, actually. Graduating next month with my master's degree. Got accepted to the Peace Corps. I'm going to help build schools in Guatemala." Claire smiled at her phone. Jessica had found her calling after all, just not in the world of concrete and steel that had consumed their father's life. That's amazing. "Jess, you'll be great at that." "Thanks. Hey, I know this might be weird, but would you like to have dinner sometime? I feel like we should talk. Really talk." Claire considered the invitation. A year ago, she would have declined without hesitation. Too much anger, too much hurt. But standing here on top of the city, having achieved everything she'd ever wanted, professionally, the old resentments felt smaller somehow. "I'd like that," she replied. They met the following Saturday at a small Italian restaurant in Ballard, far from the downtown business district where they might be recognized. Jessica looked healthier than she had in years. Her face had filled out, her eyes were clear, and she carried herself with a confidence that seemed genuine rather than performed. "You look good," Claire said, as they settled into a corner booth. "So, do you. Success suits you." Jessica smiled, then grew more serious. "I owe you an apology, Claire. A real one. You don't—" "Yes, I do. Let me say this, please." Jessica took a deep breath. "I knew Dad was planning to leave me the business. He talked to me about it months before he died. I should have told you, should have prepared you somehow. But I was selfish and—" "Scared," Claire felt her chest tighten. "Scared of what?" "Scared that if you knew, you'd try to talk him out of it. Scared that deep down even Dad knew I wasn't qualified to run the company." Jessica's voice was quiet but steady. "I thought if I could just get control of it, I could prove everyone wrong, including myself." "Why didn't Dad want me to have it?" Claire asked. It was the question that had haunted her for over a year. Jessica was quiet for a long moment, staring into her wine glass. "Because you reminded him too much of himself. The work ethic, the attention to detail, the way you could solve problems. That seemed impossible. I think it scared him." "Scared him how?" "Dad built that company from nothing, but he always felt like he had to keep proving himself. He never felt secure, never felt like he'd done enough. When he looked at you, he saw someone who might actually surpass him. With me," Jessica shrugged, "I was never a threat to his legacy. I was just his little girl who needed taking care of." Claire absorbed this revelation silently. It explained so much about her father's behavior over the years, the way he'd give her more responsibility but never more recognition, the way he'd praise her work to others but rarely to her face. "He was wrong about both of us," Jessica continued. "Wrong about what I needed, and wrong about what you deserved. You didn't need his permission to be extraordinary, Claire. You just needed the chance to prove it." They talked for 3 hours, covering years of misunderstandings, resentments, and missed opportunities for connection. By the end of the evening, Claire felt like she was seeing her sister clearly for the first time since they were children. "I'm proud of you," Jessica said, as they walked to their cars. "Not just for the business success, but for how you handled everything. You could have destroyed me completely, but you didn't. You gave me just enough rope to hang myself, then offered me a way out when I was ready to take it." "I thought about destroying you," Claire admitted. "For a while that was the plan. What changed your mind?" Claire considered the question. "I realized that revenge wasn't really what I wanted. I wanted to succeed on my own terms. The revenge was just a side effect." 6 months later, Claire stood in the same spot where she'd received the news about her father's will, but everything had changed. The old Davidson and Sons office had been renovated and converted into the Community Outreach Center for Davidson Construction Solutions' new philanthropic foundation. The foundation's first major project was funding the construction of 3 new schools in underserved Seattle neighborhoods, designed and built using innovative green building techniques that would serve as models for sustainable education. Facilities nationwide. "Ms. Davidson?" Her assistant approached with a tablet. "The final signatures just came through on the Morrison Tower project. That's another $40 million contract confirmed." Claire nodded, reviewing the digital documents. Morrison Tower would be the tallest residential building west of Chicago when completed, and landing the contract had required competing against construction firms from across the country. Her phone buzzed with a photo message from Jessica, now 3 months into her Peace Corps service. The image showed a group of Guatemalan children standing in front of a newly completed schoolhouse, their faces bright with excitement and possibility. "First day of classes in the new school," Jessica had written. "Turns out I'm pretty good at this. Building thing too, just a different kind of building." Claire smiled, then looked up at the Seattle skyline visible through her office windows. The waterfront redevelopment was ahead of schedule and under budget. Morrison Tower was breaking ground next month, and 3 more major projects were in the final negotiation stages. But the most satisfying part wasn't the money or the recognition. It was the knowledge that she'd built something that would outlast her. Something that created value, rather than just extracting it. Her mother's letter was framed on her desk now, a reminder of where this journey had begun. "Sometimes the best. Revenge is success," it read. But Claire had learned that success wasn't revenge at all. It was redemption. The phone rang, interrupting her reflection. Another potential client. Another opportunity to build something meaningful. "Davidson Construction Solutions," she answered. "This is Claire Davidson. How can we help you create something extraordinary?" Outside her windows, the city continued to grow and change, shaped by the vision and determination of people who refused to accept limitations imposed by others. Claire had joined their ranks not through inheritance or political connections, but through the simple revolutionary act of believing in her own capabilities. She'd lost a family business but gained an empire. She'd been denied an inheritance, but created a legacy. Most importantly, she'd learned that the best revenge against those who underestimate you isn't proving them wrong. It's proving yourself right. As the afternoon sun cast long shadows across her desk, Claire Davidson smiled and got back to work. There were buildings to construct, dreams to realize, and a city to help build. The girl who'd been told she wasn't good enough to inherit her father's small company had become the woman who was reshaping the skyline of one of America's great cities, and she was just getting started. 5 years later, the headline in the Seattle Business Journal read, "Davidson Construction Solutions named National Contractor of the Year." The accompanying article detailed the company's expansion to 6 cities, its pioneering work in sustainable construction, and its founder's journey from overlooked daughter to industry leader. But Claire Davidson was too busy to read about herself. She was on a construction site in Portland, reviewing plans for the Pacific Northwest's first carbon-neutral office complex, when her phone rang with a call from an area code she didn't recognize. "Ms. Davidson? This is Senator Patricia Chen. I know we've worked together before on the Seattle waterfront project, but I'm calling about something bigger. The federal infrastructure bill includes funding for a high-speed rail line connecting Seattle, Portland, and San Francisco. We'd like to discuss Davidson Construction Solutions' involvement in what could be the largest public works project in American history." Claire looked out at the Portland skyline, then back at the blueprints, spread across the makeshift table in front of her. 5 years ago, she'd been fighting for her professional life. Now she was being invited to help reshape the infrastructure of the entire West Coast. "Senator," she said, unable to keep the smile out of her voice, "I'd be very interested in that conversation. Some stories end with revenge. Others end with redemption. The best ones, Claire had learned, end with the realization that success is the ultimate form of both.